This is News Channel 2 at 6 with Bill Worden.
The story of Sara Wood has affected all of us. The trail that has taken police this far began when Sara suddenly dropped out of sight. When she first disappeared, the small community of Litchfield came rushing to help the Wood family. Perhaps she was only lost. But before long, everything led to an abduction. The 5-foot brown-haired girl had been taken in only a moment's time while pedaling home from her father's Norwich Corners church. The only evidence Sara had even been there, her bicycle and some books. They were found strewn in an area just off Hackadam Road near where Sara lived. Within days, the search had widened, and state police were brought in and an elaborate search plan put into effect, with volunteers combing literally every inch of an area in a 50-mile sweep out from Sara's home. Her parents, Bob and Frances, with the help of the Sara Wood Rescue Center, mount a strong campaign to get Sara's picture on posters. Millions go out across the country, and the Woods begin getting national coverage, appearing on shows like Donahue and Oprah Winfrey. Meanwhile, for the family, for her friends, for the community that has reached out so strongly to adopt this little girl into their hearts, we watch and wait.
You're watching The Unfinished Journey, the 30-year search for Sara. Here now is Joleen Ferris.
Good evening, everyone. I'm grateful to have you with me. It's hard to imagine Sara Anne Wood would be 42 years old today. She's forever in our hearts and minds, the 12-year-old girl kidnapped from a quiet street in her hometown of Litchfield in Herkimer County 30 years ago, never to be found. The case is closed. Her killer is serving life in prison for another child's murder, with Sara's sentence in the queue. But for Sara's family and those state police investigators and prosecutors who've worked tirelessly for the past 3 decades to find Sara, it's not over, and it won't be until she's home. We begin tonight with a look back at that day 30 years ago tomorrow that forever changed us all. August 18th, 1993, a catastrophic event on a quiet country road involving one little girl changed everything and everyone.
It was probably around 4 o'clock when I first got notified. I'm not sure if it went through 911 in Herkimer County, but I got notified by our troop headquarters that there was a disappearance of a young child, and it had some suspicious markings to it.
Such a small-town community, the Herkimer County District Attorney didn't even need to be formally notified.
I drove by. I live right around the corner. And I drove by and I saw all the police present, so I just pulled in, and that's how I found out about it.
As the minutes passed, hope that 12-year-old Sara Anne Wood had perhaps taken a different route or stopped at a friend's house began to fade.
We found her bicycle thrown in a bunch of brush off the side of Hackadam Road, and all her church papers. She had been attending a summer program, Bible school, at her father's church, which was probably about 1.5 miles away from her residence. She was on her way home on her bike when she was abducted by Mr. Lent.
But they didn't know on that day what unimaginable end Sara had met, so they did all they could do. Looked for clues, looked for evidence, and looked for Sara, a fruitless search of the area. Then, 5 months later, on January 7th, 1994, a man named Stephen Lent of North Adams, Massachusetts, tried to abduct 12-year-old Rebecca Savarese on her way home from school in Pittsfield, Mass. She escaped, faking an illness. Now retired John Wood was a New York State police captain at the time.
I dispatched an investigator out to Massachusetts to interview him in the event that he knew something about Sara Anne Wood. And it was right then at that time that he admitted it, and he admitted that he'd seen her pushing her bicycle because the chain was off. And that's when we knew we had our guy. You always hold something back that only you and the perpetrator would know. And in this instance, it was the chain off the bicycle. You'd had to been there.
Subsequent interviews of Lent trying to get him to reveal where he left Sara Anne Wood were frustrating.
And you could interview Mr. Lent for probably 3, 4, 5 hours, and he would lead you along the path, making you think he was all set to tell you something. And then he'd look at you and say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know Sara Anne Wood. and he'd go right back to ground zero, time and time again.
Lent pleaded guilty to Sarah's murder on October 26, 1996, more than 3 years after he kidnapped and killed her. He was sentenced in Herkimer County Court, where he heard from Sarah's father, Bob Wood.
On August 18th, you took my little girl, you kidnapped my daughter, Sarah, and you terrorized her. And to this day, you refuse to tell us where her body is.
And these infamous parting words from Herkimer County District Attorney Michael Daly.
And from all the people in this community that you've heard, and all the people in this community that you've changed their lives, our message to you, Louis, is burn in hell. Just saying what I felt, and that just came out and was, I meant it, and I'm sure he will.
Louis Lent is currently serving a life sentence in Old Colony Correctional Facility in Massachusetts for the murder of another child, 12-year-old Jimmy Bernardo of Pittsfield, Mass., with Sarah's sentence waiting in the queue. Based on information Lent has given to investigators, they braved sub-zero temperatures up north in Racket Lake.
And what they're trying to do is get about 2 feet into the ground over a 1-acre area where they've cleared the snow away. That is what they think could turn up Sara Anne's body.
But again, no sign of Sarah. Investigators say Lent has sent them on many wild goose chases through the years.
They were Old Forge, the Berkshires, Mountain Greylock in Massachusetts, areas down off Route 20, I believe Cherry Valley Way. We did some digging, and we had probably a dozen canines up in Indian Lake area, did some excavating up there.
Investigators have tried everything to get Lent to reveal where he left Sarah.
We had with us the chief hypnotist from the Naval Intelligence Services, who does all of the hypnotism for all the spy cases and all that stuff for the Navy. And he was under hypnosis for, I'm going to say, probably 4.5 hours. And even then he came right up to saying it, but he just wouldn't. And the hypnotist came out of that session and said, there's 2 things I can tell you for sure. 1, he knows right where she is. And 2, there's no question he did all these things.
And a document Daly says was signed by everyone from the governors of New York and Massachusetts to the New York State and U.S. Attorneys General.
If he would reveal where she was, to be allowed to serve all of his time in federal prison as opposed to state prison, and he still didn't come through.
Why won't Lent just say it? Those who've spent decades trying to persuade him can only speculate.
It's one trump card he still has, I guess. The other reason could possibly be that there's other bodies there where he has her. That's always been a thought.
There's a reason, and one of the reasons is, in my opinion, is probably because there's multiple bodies there.
When Unfinished Journey returns after the break.
When we were in Washington, Bob Wood said something that struck us all very deeply. And that was that out of the bad, we must bring about good.
Unimaginable death and hundreds of other children were saved from an unimaginable fate. Posters of the missing and cleverly delivered messages of safety. How this tragedy galvanized regular citizens into an army to protect children and forever changed how we parent. Welcome back. It would have been easy to drown in the sadness of Sarah's loss, but instead, her family and the entire community pulled together to make sure something positive came from it. And that is the incalculable number of children saved from a similar fate, thanks to posters, perseverance, strength, and faith. The kidnapping and murder of 12-year-old Sara Anne Wood didn't just galvanize police and prosecutors toward a common goal of finding Sara. It brought together strangers, civilians, forming an army aimed at raising awareness about all missing and exploited children and keeping all children safe.
So we determined it would be 100 miles, and we would ride from Albany back to Utica, and we would visit schools on the way to deliver our message of safety. And that's the beginning of Sara's Ride for Missing Children as it morphed into the Ride for Missing Children. Started here in Utica, New York, and now they have rides in Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, and also Albany.
Frank Williams was first approached by a friend involved with the ride who suggested he join and meet Sara's parents.
When you meet Bob and Francis, you become dedicated because of their strength, their love, and their determination.
Local businessman Earl Reed was similarly moved.
I met Bob Wood, and he's an amazing guy and just a gracious, good person.
So they rode their bikes, stopping at schools to spread an important message to the most vulnerable in an upbeat way, with the true heavy mission never far from their thoughts.
It's a joyous event, but as you pull away, you realize what the mission is, and that's to bring children home that aren't able to participate.
The ride funded posters made right in Utica that featured the faces of missing children.
The Wood family had developed through the center this great method of putting up posters, printed posters of missing children, not across the state but around the world. And that was a resource the national office did not have. So from that we became the Mohawk Valley office of the New York branch of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, with the mission of child safety education and also for distribution of printed posters of missing kids.
It's something that I won't ever forget, the bike ride and what we did. And if we touched somebody's soul, to be careful with your kids. The age's innocence is gone.
The ride started in memory of Sara Anne Wood, has funded millions of posters of missing children and helped recover thousands. But time marched on and COVID changed the local landscape.
COVID, everybody started working from home, and then NEWSChannel, of course, everybody has a bottom line. So they realized they could do away with the office, and which they did, and we only have one local NEWSChannel employee.
The ride itself took a hit from COVID, but organizers are working to build it back and inviting you to join and help.
We're rebuilding since COVID, and we're always looking for riders now. This December, January, we'll be making appeals for riders. If anybody's interested, get in touch with us.
The foot soldiers, spinning their wheels for a good cause, hope it'll lighten the load of an eternally grieving family.
I hope they take comfort in the legacy of Sara. This ride over 27 years has generated millions of dollars for NEWSChannel, and certainly that's been responsible for bringing some children home and preventing abductions of others.
If education and increased awareness were blessings that came from this tragedy, there was also a curse. The evil man from Massachusetts did more than kidnap and kill an innocent child. He stole an entire community's innocence.
Because I used to have to travel a lot from troop headquarters in Oneida to the command post on Hackadam Road. And, you know, for years, people, their kids would be out waiting for a bus and stand inside the road waiting for a bus. After this happened, you never seen a child standing waiting for a bus at the end of the driveway without a parent standing there with them. And I mean,
When Unfinished Journey concludes after the break.
We have conducted ground searches as recently as 6 weeks ago.
Her murderer is in jail, but the case isn't closed. A new generation of state police investigators picks up the promise made by their predecessors 3 decades ago to find Sara and bring her home. Welcome back. There are some wounds that ignore the clock and the calendar. The sting of not knowing where Sara Anne Wood is 30 years after her kidnapping and murder is one of them. While the state police investigators who worked tirelessly to close that wound have since retired, a new guard has picked up the torch and the promise to never stop looking for her. Here's News Channel 2's Ben Kinney.
Sara Anne Wood's killer, Lewis Lent, is in prison for life, but the work of these state police investigators and the Herkimer County District Attorney is not done yet. The focus has just shifted to finding Sara's remains and bringing her home. In fact, the investigators and DA just met at Troop D headquarters in Oneida on August 3rd about leads and progress toward that end, delivering on a promise made 30 years ago when District Attorney Jeff Carpenter was a brand new attorney just admitted to the bar.
The case is really done, but a commitment was made 30 years ago that Herkimer County would pursue every lead in an attempt to bring Sara Anne Wood home. It has continued through every district attorney up until my taking over the DA's office.
State police and the Herkimer County District Attorney hold these meetings regularly. And believe it or not, 30 years after the crime, leads are still coming in.
It's surprising the information that still comes in where people will call and they'll report things that they'll indicate that, you know, this has been bothering me for 30 years and I don't know if it means anything or not, but I saw this vehicle that looked like Louis Lent's vehicle at this location around the time that this occurred, or I was in the Adirondacks and I saw who I believe was Louis Lent around the time that this occurred.
And based on the information they get, state police still go out and search for Sara and have done so as recently as this summer.
We have conducted ground searches as recently as 6 weeks ago.
They're also still trying to get information from child serial killer Lewis Lent himself. But just like he disappointed their predecessors 30 years ago, he continues to let down the new guard as well.
So we've been there recently within the last couple of months. We're typically going out several times a year to speak with him in prison in Massachusetts. He has indicated to us that he really wants to resolve this matter, but he has a difficult time describing to us what's holding him back. So at this point, we're really focused on maintaining an open line of communication with him in the hopes that at some point he will assist us in resolving this.
That was a theory that he would not tell us where Sara is until his mother passed. She passed and he has not told us anything. So
the state police organization has been supportive of every effort when it comes to bringing Sara home.
Anything that we've ever asked for, we get. If we want to go search an area and we ask for cadaver dogs, we've been supported 100% with everything that we've ever asked for in this case.
Investigators say Lent, now 73 years old, is healthy, lucid, and has not expressed any major health concerns or conditions, perhaps indicating there is still time for him to do the right thing and tell police where he left Sara Anne Wood.
I do believe he does know. Yes, I believe he knows. He has indicated various times with major crimes that he's wanted to tell us, but he's just not ready. I think he knows exactly where she is.
State police will never stop trying, picking up where their predecessors left off 30 years ago.
But they all said at that time that the job wasn't done, and it's still not done. And I think that we all feel that responsibility, that it's the right thing to do. We want to do the right thing by her family and really for the whole community.
And we thank them and their predecessors for their unwavering commitment, and we look forward to that phone call someday. Unfinished Journey, the 30-year search for Sara, will air again tomorrow night at 7 on CBS, and it will be at WKTV.com as well. I'm Joleen Ferris. Thanks for watching.